Kia ora koutou whānau. My name is Cliff Thompson. It's good to have you here. Look at my name tonight. Get a whiff of Cliff. How good is that? What's up, my friend? How you going?
Kia ora, Cliff. I'm loving that fresh fade. I'm well though. Yeah.
It's great to have you here. If it's your first time with us, welcome. If it's your second time here, welcome back. If it's your third time with us, welcome home. How about that? I remember one time, Bodes, when one of our worship leaders was on stage. He tried to rattle that off, but it wasn't so eloquent when he said it. I think he said, if it's your first time here, welcome. If it's your second time here, welcome back. And if it's your third time here, he was like, welcome back.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Hashtag JP.
Hashtag JP. There you go. So if it is your first time here, again, welcome. It's great to have you. We've got a special guest tonight. I'm actually really looking forward to this conversation, as we have every conversation, but just really in particular looking forward to what we're talking about tonight and getting into some of the nitty-gritty. We're going to bang straight into this section of our special guest tonight. And like I said, I'm really excited to be able to have a kōrero with this man here this evening. His name is Phil Pawley, and Phil is a husband, a father, a grandfather. He's a leader. While he doesn't pastor a church anymore, he's still in the sphere of his work. He pastors people. So he's a leader of people. He leads an organization at the moment that I have the privilege to be a part of and working with. And I'm going to let him talk a bit more about that. So, like I said, as we bring him in right now, we've got the comments, the question section going. Please fire your questions through, and we'll ask them to Phil as we have that kōrero tonight. So let's bring Phil in. Let's bring Phil into the show. Kia ora, Phil. How are you?
Welcome.
Yep, I'm good, thanks. Good.
Yeah, great to have you here, and we really appreciate you making the time, not only to be with us, but making your room look mighty amazing, spick and span. Looks great.
Chiefs.
Go the Chiefs.
Yeah, there's the Saints behind me as well.
Great. Yeah, nice. We're going to talk a bit about that stuff in a moment, about the Saints and stuff like that. But Phil, for those that don't know you and they don't know a bit about who you are and where you're from, give us a bit of a rundown about your family. Give us a bit of a kōrero about who you are, what your journey has been. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what this experience of lockdown has been like for you, and also in terms of what you lead, the people you lead, your heart for some of the people that you're leading at the moment. So yeah, who are you? Where you're from? What's your background?
I was born in Auckland, born in Point Chev, before it was posh, and moved and grew up in Mangere until we moved up to the Coromandel Peninsula. I have three brothers. I'm the second oldest, the most handsome of them all, and I spent a few years fishing with my father, crate fishing at the top of the peninsula, until I joined the army and went trained to be a chef. Once I got my apprenticeship, I met the woman who became my wife. She was Miss Mount Maunganui, and so I was gone straight away. There was no way I was going to dip out on that. So I'd like to say it was love at first sight, but it was probably a bit more animal than that. Anyway, we got married, funny enough, and started having kids. Pretty soon after being married, we both came to faith in Christ. Neither of us had particularly religious backgrounds, but we ended up working for a guy who was Christian, and there's something about his life and about our neighbours who are also believers that just challenged us, and so we saw our lives turn around, which is probably a very good thing, because our marriage would have been completely munted at that point. And so it was just this slow, long walk from there of growing in faith, growing as a married couple, growing as parents. We ended up working with Youth of the Mission for 15 years, and that took us over to the UK, to a place called St Helens. And from there, I ended up working with the Church of England for about, I think it must have been 12 years, until we came home and for me to pass to Morrinsville Baptist.
Yeah, well, so you mentioned there about obviously you've mentioned quite a few interesting things about your feral instincts when it comes to your wife, which mate, I don't think you're alone, so don't worry about that. But also to the fact
those things.
But I picked up there, which I'm keen to talk about, and also for some of our listeners to hear about, is you mentioned there, and you sort of alluded to that great picture frame you have on your wall there about your time in St. Helens. What was it that happened significantly for you in St. Helens that sort of steered and engineered this future going forward for you and what you're involved in today?
I had a knock on my door in 1998 by an extremely large Samoan Kiwi, and he was a forward for St Helens Rugby League. He had played rugby union here in New Zealand, and but he was the star of the show for Saints, and he said, he just asked me straight out, would I help him set up sports chaplaincy within the club? He felt that the club really needed a sports chaplain, and then he went on and asked whether I'd be willing to become that chaplain. So that began a journey. His name was Apollo Perolini, or better known as the Terminator back then. And he went to one of the local Pentecostal churches, so he was a man of faith himself. And that began a journey of 10 years, for my final 10 years in St Helens, where I was the chaplain, the first chaplain they'd had. And in fact, at that point, when I became chaplain at St Helens, there was only one other guy over the other side of the country who was a rugby league chaplain. By the time I came home, all but two of the Super League clubs had chaplains. And I heard just last year that Rugby League England now requires all of their professional and semi-professional clubs to have a sports chaplain. That's how important they see it is in the life of the sport.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. And we're going to talk a little bit about sport chaplaincy in a moment. But just going off that conversation, I mean, as you work in that field, so you begin working with St. Helens, you begin working with these young men, these athletes. What were, and we're obviously not asking any specifics about specific people or cases, or situations, but in terms of life challenges, I mean, what are some of these things that people are facing, athletes are facing that you've seen every day, and the importance of having someone to speak to and to talk to and navigate through? What are some of those challenges that you've seen just in life in general for some of these people?
There's a variation between grassroots and elite level sports, although the human things that we face are pretty much the same wherever we are. So there were issues of substance abuse that some of them were struggling with, particularly alcohol, gambling, relationship breakdown, where just not able to hold relationships together, being feral. One of the things about my own background was I really got these guys, having come out of the army and had a bit of a rough beginning to my own journey. It meant that I could sit and relate to them without judgment. To me, none of it shocked me. None of it surprised me. I remember going to court with one of the lads who'd been using cocaine, and in the end, the judge asked if I was willing to spend the next 10 weeks just sitting with this guy once a week, talking over where his life was up to and helping get back on the track. So there was the pressures of large amounts of money falling into their hands for some of them, although there was huge diversity within the club, from the highest paid to the lowest paid. There was loss of form, broken expectations, broken relationships, marriages falling apart, you name it. It was going on. So I think for me, one of the biggest things that I noticed when I started was that the club did not have a very good policy of care for particularly their international players. And so they would come in there, they'd be put into a hotel, and pretty soon their wife or their partner would be missing mum, missing home, and quite often they'd only stay for a year. And so one of the things I felt to do was to try and get the club to buy into the idea of really inducting people well, caring for them. So within a couple of years, we got it spun around, and the incoming players would end up with a rented house. They wouldn't be put into a hotel. They would have a car. It was automatic because most of them were Aussies and they didn't know how to drive manuals. There was heating on because it was middle of January, freezing cold, food in the fridge. toys in the cupboard for the kids. There was flowers on the table. There was, you name it. And it was all done so that when they arrived, they actually felt loved, cared for, and welcomed. And that was all part of changing the whole culture of the club to being a family and being a, belonging as whānau. And so I think seeing the difficulties that these guys went through and their partners, it just would break your heart at times. And it's normal human beings with normal problems. Yeah,
and I think, as I think about what you're saying there, and I think about leadership, and I think about even the times we're in now, like the situation with the lockdown and slowly beginning to come out of it, we can be, it's weird, we can be so task-driven even at the moment, but we can feel like there's a whole lot of stuff to be done. Even if you're locked down in your home, it's felt intensified. For people that are listening, watching, I hear you talk about even working with these teams and these athletes and all the things that they have to do, all the stuff that you might have to do as you're working with them. But what value do you place on building relationship with people? And I think because there's obviously all the stuff that needs to be done. And as you lead an organization and you have staff and you have people, we can always feel like there's stuff to be done. But for someone that's listening right now, thinking about all the things that they have to do, all the pressures and where to ease off, where to push, and it can be the whole human aspect can be lost in it, the whole relational aspect. So my question, I suppose I'm asking is, what is the value that as you as a leader put on the building of relationships versus the doing of the tasks, even in a time like this?
I think it's important to understand some of us are very task-oriented, and that's a personality thing. But if you are task-oriented, you need to know where to draw the line and make sure that you relate and that you focus on relationship. Relationship for me would be everything. It's probably not my natural suit because I'm an action person. I want to go and do stuff. But if I don't invest in relationship, then the wheels fall off. So in leadership, I think the crucial thing is how do we build relationship within a sporting context, in any sports code. The relationship of the team is everything. If I was just reading in the book that we were talking about before, Legacy, of how the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack. And actually, the idea is that it's having a star player doesn't actually matter as much as having a team of who are utterly committed to each other. I saw that in some house. We had some stunning players, but it was only when Daniel Anderson was there and he began to shape the team as a team that the star players recognized actually their real role was to mentor and encourage the younger guys coming through and to be team, to be there for each other. So I think if you can get that across to any team, a team will flourish. For me, leadership has to be building relationships, whether it's in a marriage where you take initiative and take responsibility to build a relationship. You don't leave it to your partner. In any kind of relationship, I think we have to take that initiative to focus on it. These things don't happen automatically. They require investment. And for me, I would see that's where relationship sits. It has to be invested in because it's the heart of everything.
And I think even so just drilling into that a little bit further, and then we're gonna start talking a little bit about actually what chaplaincy is, and I'm excited to get you to have some conversation around that because you've already sort of alluded to it. But thinking about you now personally at home during this season, because in the time I've known you, you are a man that does like to, you're quite inspired by things. You like to make things move and shake and happen. You like to think and whether I coin the phrase engineer things, which is great. Times like this can be quite frustrating for a person like that. What have been some of your own personal challenges or things you've just had to think about, shift and change or adjust maybe during a lockdown time like this?
I think one of the things I see, Cliff, is that the lockdown will affect everybody in some way, and it affects some more profoundly than others. Whether a person's an introvert or an extrovert, both are going to be impacted in some way within this. for me, the challenge as an extrovert, as a person who is active, who wants to go and do stuff, the challenge has been to learn to sit, to reflect, as a follower of Jesus, to stop, to think, to pray, and reevaluate what's really, really important. I look at our role as sports chaplains, and that hasn't gone away in the midst of this. But the way that we can deliver has had to change. It has to be more reflective. It has to be more digital. It can't be the face-to-face stuff at the same level. So it has been challenging. One of the things that helped me was I built a retaining wall for the first week of lockdown. And so, I'd finish work and race outside and grab a shovel and a hammer and bash away until I was completely knackered, and then, it would turn dark and I'd come in, some concrete and what have you. So I think sometimes you just have to do stuff. Even now, retaining wall's finished, I'll get on my bike and ride up the Thames coast where I live, do 25 Ks up to Wilson's Bay and back. And so it's about trying to find ways in which you can still do those active things, but you compensate in some ways. But I think it is a time for readjustment and reflection and make the most of the space that we have.
Yeah, and what do you think about a person? So I've in my life so far have realized something about myself a while ago, is that I've typically been at some points in my life a poor rester, or a more PC way to put that is I'm an active rester, right? I haven't rested well when I should have at times, and knowing when to button off, and I get that has probably been something maybe in your life you've had to work through, and you're saying that now being a lot more active. What's helped you take stock of the moments you've needed to just, what's been those moments, those light bulbs that said, that you've said and recognized that I actually need to stop? And what does that stopping look like for you? What does that slowing down or that resting actually mean for you, Phil?
I think warning signs would be getting a clip on the ear from my wife, or some kind of notification that relationship needs to be focused on here. Yeah, she's an introvert, so it's okay for her. She can dive into a woman's cave and make cards or do something like that when she needs to escape my constant prattle. I think rest for me is always a matter of choice. When I hit the pillow at night, I just go out like a light, and I get up and I start moving and going for it. I don't like lying down. I don't like taking it easy. I probably need to go and take a holiday on a beach somewhere with nothing to do, with no retaining walls, nothing. But I'm more likely to go and take a holiday with a mate and go and build something. So I think for me, it's always been about choice. I've got to stop and recognize that we need rest. And I think it's partly about a state of mind and heart, understanding that, understanding what it means to rest in God as well. So that I can be chilled out, even though I can be active, I can be chilled out. So often I'll try and do stuff where I can rest, and my physical body's going for it, but my mind's able to rest and float and mutter things and think and reflect. I'll walk down to the beach. It's a K down the hill and then along the beach for a couple of Ks and back. Thankfully, we have one of the longest beaches on this side of the peninsula, and so I'll wander down there, look at gemstones, and I'll reflect, and I'll think about what we're doing as a ministry, and I like picking up precious stones off the beach. So I'll distract myself like that as ways of resting, but I'll also incorporate connecting with God and connecting with the beauty around me, and it's all trying to take the mind out of active gear and just put it in drive for a while.
Oh, that's great. And so you mentioned there, and this is our segue. You beautifully gave it to me. You said there about picking up precious gems. One of these precious gems is this thing called Sport Chaplaincy in New Zealand, and it's
Great segue.
I am good. I think so. But anyway, Sport Chaplaincy New Zealand, Phil. It's big on your heart. You're an ambassador for it. You're a leader for it within it. When I first heard about it and I first saw it, and I've told the story. My heart jumped because of what it meant missionally, Great Commission wise. But if we were to keep it simple, if we can, for the average listener viewer out there that might not know what sport chaplaincy is, what chaplaincy is, what is it? That's our start point. What is chaplaincy? And then we'll ask the questions around sport chaplaincy New Zealand in a moment.
Yeah. For me, it's very simple. It's about caring for people pastorally, irrespective of who they are, where they are, what they believe, what they do. It makes no difference to me if they need somebody to come alongside them, put an arm around their shoulder, listen to them, maybe give them some advice if they want that, but just to be there with them and for them at a moment in their life where they do need somebody. That's what sports chaplaincy is about. It develops beyond that, but it starts with that unconditional, non-judgmental caring pastorally for people, looking out for their mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being.
No, that's great. And so going from that now, obviously, what's your role with so everyone knows, what's your role with Sport Chaplaincy New Zealand, and what are some of the things you want to see? What's your heart for it? What's your vision for it? What do you want to see Sport Chaplaincy New Zealand achieve over the next few years?
So my dream would be to see 1,000 sports chaplains in all levels of sport, all codes of sport, all regions of the country, so that sports people, whether they're athletes or part of organisations and clubs or officials, have access to that pastoral care, where they can turn to somebody who's not on the payroll, who's not there to win, but is there to care for the people involved in sport. They can turn to that person, that other person, that voice that can be trusted. Seeing that kind of a movement through our land, for me, is profoundly important. We're a sporting nation. Having spent nearly a decade as a pastor, the focus very often of the church is to try and get people to come to church. The focus of the church should be to try and get people out of church and go and engage with the community.
Absolutely.
And just to be good news within the community, to love people, to care for people, to show them that they're important, that they have value. So for me, sports chaplaincy is a way that we can go and just be good news to the people of our nation. It's a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And I know in the short time I've been involved with sport chaplaincy now, just the amazing inroads, the amazing work that we're able to do with people, the privilege and the honor it is to sit in some of those spaces now, and people that have paved the way, like yourself, the Grant Harrises, and those that have gone before, and people that are doing great work now. I mean, it's amazing some of the inroads we're having and we're seeing God do in those spaces, and we want to agree. We want to see that grow and continue to grow and see more people. Because when we talk about not just place chaplains, and you've sort of alluded to it, but just to frame it up nicely and concisely, if we place this many sport chaplains, Phil, what does that mean for the gospel? And what does it mean for New Zealand if there are that many chaplains out there?
If you think of New Zealand, first of all, I think Sports New Zealand brought out these figures out that 75% of adults and 92% of kids and young people are engaged in sport or recreation in any given week. Now, that's been slightly munted over the last 4 weeks, but under normal circumstances. And a big chunk of that is competitive sport, which is our primary area of interest. Not exclusively, we touch the fringes as well, but competitive sports where we focus. So what we're looking at doing is seeing people engage with clubs and teams and within those sporting contexts to be the pastor of those people, to be the carer of those people, to be somebody who is there for them whether they win or lose. Yeah. They're there for them in the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so if you think about the fact that so much of New Zealand is engaged in sport, we know we're a sports crazy country. Missionally, it's a no-brainer. If we want to see this nation understand well-being in its true sense, which is not just mental and emotional, it's spiritual as well. It's that holistic wellness of a human being. Then we need to be in the community. We need to be caring for people. We need to be starting where people are, rather than expecting them to be where we are. So if you're a person of faith, don't expect people to come to you. You go to that person and earn your stripes. One of the things I found in St. Helens as a Saints chaplain for 10 years. I remember one situation. Halfway through a game, we were playing away at Warrington, and Apollo came to me and said, so-and-so's in the changing room. He wants to talk to you. I went into the changing room. This lad was sitting there under Sky TV camera, and he said, I can't read exactly what he said on live radio, but basically he said, it's his life was munted. He was struggling with a bunch of things, with substance abuse. His wife was an alcoholic. He was an alcoholic. His kids were running riot. He was, his marriage was completely messed up. He had lost his form, and now he was injured. And he's one of these players who seldom ever got injured. And he turned to me and he said, I know I've got to get God into the center of my life. How do I do that? Can you help? And the thing about that was that it took 5 or 6 years to build a relationship with that lad, that he would actually trust me to have that kind of conversation. What I'm saying is that, we've got to stop flitting in and out of the community. We've got to stop being those who just go and serve meals, although that's really, really important. And food banks and stuff like that. All that's absolutely essential stuff. We've got to keep doing that. But actually, you need to go and live in communities and be in communities, feel the pain that people feel and feel the burden that they have, and understand life from their perspective. I think so often the stuff that we have to share doesn't resonate with people in the community because we don't understand their culture. We don't understand their pain. We don't understand their difficulty. We've isolated ourselves. Well, here's a chance for us to roll up our sleeves and get back into society and say, how can I help?
Yeah, no, that's great, Phil. Yeah, no, definitely. And again, that's the stuff that makes my heart jump, because I agree with it wholeheartedly. What we're going to do, Phil, is, and we're going to be able to talk a little bit more, we're going to fire through some pictures you've given us that will even help us tell a bit of the story. We're going to fire through them fairly rapidly, and then we're going to get to some questions. So as these photos come up, just explain to us what they are, what's going on at that time, and then we'll just keep moving through. So let's bring the first one up. What's going on there?
First pig I managed to catch.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I had them too. The first time I held the Super League trophy at St. Helens Rugby League. So there's a whole bunch of Kiwis there. Nice. Yep, Apollo was standing beside Diane. He was the guy who I blamed for getting me into sports chaplaincy. Mokapuna. That's my darling wife, and that's our little fella crying his eyes out. One of our grandies. Yeah, I mean, what can I say? I caught them both. I was out nice. And within 20 minutes, I pulled up 2 12-pounders. He was absolutely spewing. I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro to raise money for a big mission that we were doing, and that was, in fact, we did it twice, 2005, 2006, and we raised £100,000. So there was a team of 12 of us went up. The second time, I didn't have a photo of them, but our twins went up with me. So it was a wonderful privilege to have them at the top of Kilimanjaro with me.
Wow, that's great.
Oh, yeah. I'm in the middle of that somewhere. What have we got there? That's the Challenge Cup, one of the many times we won the Challenge Cup. Yeah, Daniel Anderson's coach. There's the Samoan lad on the on my left, Mori Fosavalo. I had the privilege of marrying him and his girlfriend when they arrived in St. Helens, and we ended up as their mama and papa, and we're still in contact with them today. We're godparents to their oldest boy. So God sometimes blesses you with amazing relationships.
That's great. Very cool.
Sunset from my deck.
What more do you have to say? Sunset from the deck.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Somebody has to live here, so
say no more.
Taking the hit.
Oh, this one. Now, I pulled this one up because I chucked this one in. This is the moment that I first met Phil or saw Phil at this hui. And this is where he spoke, and he had like 10 minutes or less to talk about Sport Chaplaincy New Zealand. And it was that moment that I had walked out of the room straight after and thought, we've got to be involved in some way. I knew I had to. So that's why I wanted to throw that one in there, Phil. It's a very significant moment for me, actually. Yeah, it's cool.
Tūranga Waiwai Kiwi. He was my tutor for te reo. We started te reo lessons at Morrinsville Baptist and had about 100 people a year coming through the classes. Wonderful man of God, wonderful teacher. He was a great tutor. I was a lousy student. Still trying to learn.
Nice.
My triumph. Facing green, my trophy. Yeah, beautiful. That was my midlife crisis. I went and bought a 900cc a touring bike, and did a bit of touring around England and the UK. Europe while we were over there.
Nice.
It was. Most important picture of all, that's my whānau. So it's a rare photo with many of my family, most of my family in there.
Cool.
We had our kids over from England and just had a wonderful time.
That's great. And I think we had one of Sport Chaplaincy New Zealand, but we talked a little bit about that. There we go. And there we are, Sports Chaplaincy New Zealand, the organisation that you represent, that I represent, and that I'm humbled to be a part of, and doing some amazing, significant things. So what we're going to do now is we're going to pull in a few questions. If we have some there, we'll pull some through and have a look at what people have
Can I
got
ask
for
a
us.
question?
You sure can, Bodie.
This is a personal one, Phil. You said you grew up in the Coromandel. Whereabouts in the Coromandel did you grow up?
Port Charles. That was my teenage years.
Oh, wow. Whereabouts in Port Charles?
So if you go in Port Charles, we backed on to the hippie commune just above the wharf. I won't go into the history of what came about by being so close to my friends on the farm, but needless to say, it was part of my bad days.
I know just my family had a batch up in Sandy Bay.
Yep. You always got past on the winding up before you drop down into Sandy Bay. So we were just past the Radio Shack after the first corner up on the hillside.
Small world. Sorry, everyone.
Anyway, enough of Bodie. Let's get to the questions here. As a sports chaplain, how do you balance your availability to a team on the weekends and being at church? Good question.
Oh, it is a big question. I think you've got to look at the responsibilities you have and just work within that context. I was able to get the games on a Sunday afternoon because they were in the afternoon, didn't interfere with our church commitments. As a sports chaplain now, I'm able to give more of my time to that. It's just a matter of looking at your existing responsibilities and weighing them up. And most of our chaplains are volunteers who put in probably about 4 to 8 hours a week during the season. So it's getting along to training once or twice a week and then getting to your home games if you can get to them. Occasionally, as in my case, when I was well entrenched at Saints, I was going away with the team for weekends down to London and over the Pennines and wherever. So I'd travel away with them as well. I'd become part of the backroom team.
Yeah, that's great. And I think just even to support that, I mean, again, we go back to the Great Commission, which is to go out into the world and to make disciples. And you really have to, I think you have to carry that on your heart and spirit as well and realize that, this is part of what it's going to take to really reach people for Jesus. Like you said, get into those community spaces and places where people are. And you have to make some of those decisions and choices. So that's great. I'm going to move to this question here. Kia ora, Phil. In the many years you've served in sports chaplaincy ministry, what good advice can you give to someone who wants to step into being a sports chaplain?
Kia ora rā. I'd say the number one thing is to start where people are rather than where you might want them to be. And being willing to invest in people's lives, irrespective of whether they ever make a move towards Christ or not. They are created in the image of God. They are spiritual, whether they recognize that or not. They are human. They have real needs. So I think if you want to become a chaplain, you have to start by just loving people and caring for people unconditionally and not placing your own expectations on them. So it's all about motivation of serving.
Nice. Here, right down to the important questions now. Have you had any takeaways? And if not, what are you going to have first?
So I have my own barista coffee. That was one of the things we decided to buy when we moved up the peninsula. So I haven't missed out on coffee in that time. In fact, I've pigged out on it. We made our own Kentucky Fried Chicken last week. We couldn't wait, and
let's go.
23 kilometers away from takeout. So I don't bother with them.
Yeah, good on you, Phil. We've got another question here. What was your greatest highlight as a sports chaplain?
Oh, how many of them? Look, I'd like, obviously there were amazing experiences walking out with the team to Old Trafford. I used to do the timekeeping while I went through the warm-up exercises. Apollo would take us through the exercises. To walk out to Old Trafford when it's absolutely pumping with 80,000 people, or into the new Wembley or the Millennium Stadium in Wales, or all of those were pinnacle experiences, and I can understand the adrenaline and the addictiveness of that level of sport. But I think for me, the highlight would be something simple like marrying Maury and Lily, sitting down and having conversation with one of the team members who was struggling. Those are the highlights. Those are the real highlights. Cleaning up the changing rooms, being able to model servant leadership. That's a highlight.
Great. That's awesome. And what would be some advice you would give to someone who finds it hard to talk to new people?
Yeah, good one. I don't find it that easy. So in fact, sometimes it's not new people I don't want to talk to. When you're a pastor, you sometimes want to change sides of the road so you don't have to talk to people you know. Did I just say that? It did come out live, didn't it?
It is the truth.
I think it's you have to ask God to put His heart into you. You need your heart to be changed by His heart to see people as He sees them, and then I think at that point you're willing to go and get to know people. I think also if you're trying to sell something, look, most people don't want to buy. The best thing to do with new people is to actually be genuinely interested in them and who they are and what makes them tick. And so learn how to ask good questions.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Got a couple more. I'm going to ask you this one, then I've got an interesting one that I'm just going to pull through. How has the uptake been from our local churches all over New Zealand for sports chaplaincy?
Well, it's early days in New Zealand. We don't have a history of sports chaplaincy. And what I find is that wherever I go and whoever I speak to within church context, there's always people whose lights go on. They just get it. They see this is what they've wanted to do all their life. They love sport. They love being involved with sports people, but I've always felt that it was in conflict to their faith. And with sports chaplaincy, you lose conflict. You realize that actually God's already out on the sports fields. He loves the people of this nation. He's not out there judging them. He's out there loving them, and he's longing for his kids to get out of churches and go and love people with him. So I think that would be, for me, the key factor in this. I think as people catch this vision, we'll see it grow phenomenally. So in the UK, for instance, they had a history of their vicars and their priests being involved in the community. Australia, for some reason, really got into the idea of chaplaincy 30 years ago, and it's been growing steadily. For New Zealand, we're laid off the blocks, but we've seen some really surprising uptake, and I'm expecting us to be multiplying. We've got about 50 chaplains out there now, and I'd anticipate that by the end of this year we should be doubling that and doubling it again. That's our goal, anyway.
That's awesome. Wow. And look, we've had so many since you put that picture of you holding the fish up. We've had so many comments about people being hungry. So I'm going to ask this one real quick, and then we're going to move along. What's the best lure for and spot for fishing? We hungry.
Ooh, giving away the secret spots.
A muscle barge. You don't need the lure. You just need a bit of muscle on a hook and throw it over. I mean, they just jump into your boat. Honestly, we look out over farms, and I'm looking out there longingly, seeing all the barges harvesting mussels, and thinking, can I swim out there and fish? Is that legal? And
I suppose no good fisherman is going to give away their fishing spot. So sorry on that one, whoever you are. Just one thing on top. What's one thing that's sitting on your heart, your spirit? One piece of encouragement, maybe, that you can give to our listeners right now. We'll start with you, Phil.
This season will pass, so don't lose hope.
Nice.
Make the most of it, actually.
Yeah, it's great. Great advice. Thank you, Phil. Appreciate that. Bodie?
Just in line with the whole McDonald's thing. On a serious note, like this 4 weeks has been a time of, for some people, like, I can't wait to get back to the old way. But maybe this time is a time of getting rid of that old way and going, let's change it up. Like, and McDonald's is like an analogy. Is like, I can't wait to go back and have a feed of that. But actually, maybe in that 5 week time, maybe there's a time about being still and reflecting. And sometimes I think, like, people. We live in a society where we want distractions, and sometimes we get caught up in that as well. We fill our lives with busyness and distractions that we're almost scared to face some real truths in our own lives. And sometimes you see a lot of people busy themselves with a lot of stuff during this quarantine period. But maybe, like to Phil's point earlier around stepping back and just reflecting on life and confronting yourself and connecting to the Lord, maybe you'll find a shift and a change that, isn't McDonald's in a metaphorical sense, but it's something better for you coming out of this season.
Nice.
McDonald's.
Beautiful.
Hey man, there was way too many people waiting out on the burger field. Oh man, that's terrible. Come on, guys. 2 meters apart.
Oh man, people and their burgers, bro. Don't get between people and their burgers. That's the reality of it all.
I wasn't lying. Behind me.
For me, real simple. I've just been thinking again about Galatians 6:9. Do not give up the habit of doing good. And, being good to one another, doing a good thing, being kind, doing the work of the Lord, loving one another. I think really, again, the reminder that is still so important. As we talked about something like sport chaplaincy again tonight, about the mission field that's out there. It's love and care and community that really does make a difference. So for me, that's what I've been thinking about. I pray that sits with you somewhere in your spirit tonight, as well as the other things our brothers have mentioned here. Phil, we thank you for your time. I hope you've had a bit of fun tonight. If you don't know people, if you want to become a sport chaplain, come and ask one of us about it. We would love you to be part of the journey and have a bit of a corridor with us about that. If you're listening, you're part of a sports club, you're part of an organization that needs that sort of support and care, then please be in touch with Sport Chaplaincy New Zealand. We'd love to work with you, support you, care for you. Again, Phil, thank you for your time. Bodie, thank you again. My name's Cliff Thompson. We are the Render Gathering, helping you become. Enjoy the rest of your